what does the definition of success mean, and is it even important?
What does success mean to you, Ben?
I'll give you the consultant answer.
All right, welcome to the Wild and Wise podcast, a place for creative business minds where we explore the stories and concepts of how to stay ahead in a fast-changing world. Today, we'll be diving into areas of reinvention where work, identity, technology, and all the good stuff that's happening around the world is constantly colliding and shifting and moving around. And how do we really make sense of this very complex world? Right, through our lives, as we grow in our careers and as we grow across our daily lives, how do we make sense out of this? And we have two amazing, smart people today, Ben and Vincent. I want to introduce them to you, but I'll actually know what I'll do. I'll get them to introduce themselves. So Ben, over to you.
That's a good intro.
Nicely done.
Nicely done. Name is Ben. I'm a consultant by nature.
Yeah.
So I work at the intersection of marketing, technology, and strategy. Mm-hmm. So done a lot of stuff in my past. So we'll talk about that when we talk about pivoting and transitions and reinventions and etc. But yeah, I spend a lot of my time looking at technology, how technology helps businesses.
Yeah.
And I work across Southeast Asia, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. So much rich experience, so much rich, amazing good stuff. We'll get into that as we go. Thanks, Ben. Vincent, over to you. What do you do?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Vincent. My career path is pretty similar to Ben's. I guess that's why we're friends. So I'm currently a brand strategist by day, but with a consultancy. Yeah. But I'm also a huge believer of side quests. So I guess over the course of time, I've started a couple of things on the side. The ones that are, I guess, more prominent is this retail brand called Freshly Pressed Socks.
Yeah, amazing.
This is a brand that basically we design and sell socks that have a story behind them. It's a local brand. We have local designs and also some pop culture stuff, mainly retailing online. And then most recently, I'm sort of kickstarting another business project called Overthink, which is, I would describe it more as a toolkit for critical thinking, right? And basically, a lot of these things are to answer things that I need myself. Yeah. And so, yeah, basically, and we can talk more about that as well.
Amazing, man. Like, you guys have amazing careers. You have done many, many different things in your lives, in what you do for work, right? You have done different businesses as well. You work with many different clients, right? So what do you think the word reinvention means from the last time, when you were starting your career versus in today's crazy world, right? What do you think the word reinvention really means to anyone listening to us out there?
Oh, man. So much to unpack, right? Yeah. In the past, a lot of times when you're looking at reinvention, a lot of times we equate that to career change. Yeah. How do you change from one career to another? Yeah. Or you're moving from one job or one role to another. And that's how normally people equate invention to. Yeah. I guess today, with so much change happening in the world, so much uncertainty, but also new things developing, I guess that word becomes a little bit more important. Yeah. To me, I think there are probably three things today that are making reinvention important. One is obviously coming out of COVID, the way we operate, the way we work, the way we live, and what we want to do, where we want to live, all those kinds of things are changing. Yeah. Secondly is after COVID, Gen Z came into the workplace. Yeah. By 2030, my son, Gen Alpha, will come into the workplace. So even from a generation perspective, how they work, how they operate, how they think, that's changing as well. Yeah. Then obviously, thirdly, and I'm sure at some point we'll talk about it, so I might as well just break that. Yeah. Now is AI. Yeah. And AI is changing the way we think about things, the tools that we use, and eventually even our jobs. Yeah. So I think reinvention in that context means who am I in that world? How do I operate? And how do I continue to grow and succeed and live my life, right? Yeah. That's to me.
Very cool. I love how you broke it down, man. Yeah. Intergenerational, the skill set to technology that evolves with time. Each moment in time is a moment of reinvention itself, perhaps, right? So I love how you kind of broke that down.
Very consultant like Ben.
Very consultant. How about you, Vincent? What's your take on reinvention?
Those are great points, and I agree with all of them. I think for me, the main thing right now is that we're at sort of like a global inflection point. We know what's happening in the world right now, right? So like the convergence between what's happening politically in the financial markets, we talk about things like inflation, and these are some of the things that impact us very much in Singapore as well. And also we talk about jobs and AI obviously coming in. It's a combination of all these different factors that I guess make people wonder like what's next and what else is there, right? So I think reinvention is in that context is important because as external forces sort of affect you, there's a need to sort of keep changing, updating. Like the worst thing you can do is maintain status quo. I think it's also interesting because if you think about what we do at I've been, I guess, in some capacity as strategist working with various different businesses and you help them sort of transform their business. So in a way, that's business reinvention. And there's a need to do that because, technology accelerates, opportunities arise, ability to grow in different markets and expand. If you think about what that means for you personally, right, it's the same sort of construct, right? And I think it's fascinating thinking about, in a professional capacity, thinking about frameworks, models, and things that we do to help businesses and then thinking how can we apply those things in our personal lives. And so I think that's kind of what reinvention is. And I think also there is, this notion right now that with everything available right now, it's more and more possible for people to be more and more control their life, right? Because it's so much easier to do that right now with the tools available and things like that. So I think more people are looking for opportunities to be able to leverage on that, be more high agency and dictate what they can do.
Very cool.
I think that's an interesting thing, right? I mean, most of the time you think about reinvention, maybe in the past more
business
reactionary as well, whereby something happened and therefore I need to make a change, or I'm reacting to an external factor, or I lost my job, or the roles are changing. I think the interesting thing is how do you think about reinvention more from a strategic point of view or intentional and purposeful? I was trying to think about some example. I mean, obviously we just finished the Singapore elections as well, and you will see 50% of the candidates are new candidates coming into the field, and they're coming from their jobs and occupancies, right, and coming into a whole new field of politics.
Correct.
So you will see a whole new set of people trying to reinvent themselves from a private sector to a public sector. So examples like that, and then more to your space, you think about artists reinventing themselves, Beyonce going from one genre to country, for example. I mean, so I think there's those facets of reinvention as well. Those are more reactionary. I got to do something because it's happening to me, versus I know I want to make that change because of certain strategic reasons, for example, right? And I think that facet becomes interesting to explore.
I think, and let's go into that, right, that space. I look at it like personal reinvention and business reinvention. And sometimes as individuals, there is a combination of that, right? Because if you're a business owner, then you are looking at it from that perspective. Personally, how do I need to reinvent? And then from a business, how do I also apply that? And if you're putting on your work perspectives, like working with organizations to reinvent themselves, wow, that's a huge topic itself already, right? So let's maybe explore, like, if you were to look at individual reinvention. I love what you said, Ben, like, is it personally driven, or is there a strategic view on that? Because we're all so complex. What's your take on personal reinvention? What would be an approach? For the people listening out there, like, okay, if I want to reinvent myself, how should I do it? How should I approach it? Right? It's so complex because is it from a work perspective, or is it coming from, I want to build my own personal brand, or I want to build my own personal business, for example? Or is it a combination of both? So I just want to unpack that and hear your thoughts on that. What do you think?
I mean, I think what Ben mentioned, being intentional about it is, I think, probably the key word. Right? Not being reactive, but sort of proactively trying to stay ahead of the curve is probably, I guess, the best way to put it. Right? The quote comes into mind, like, change before you have to, right? Which is,
love that.
Before your hand gets forced. It's also what we tell a lot of the companies that we work with, right? And the businesses we work with, that there's a need, because you almost have to disrupt yourself before you get disrupted, right? So I think that's one of the main things. And I think where that comes from a personal standpoint, I think the first thing is to sort of look at what paradigms that you have that can be broken. I mean, Ben talked a lot about like the artists that you work with. Like a lot of what you understand as who you are and what you do is changed because there's so many overlaps, right? And you can be so much more, and there's no longer just one way of doing something. Right, there's a multitude of different things. Even the whole notion of work has changed, right? Where, main quest versus side quest. Maybe now the side quest is the main quest, right? So I think there's all these things that shift, and that intersection allows you to sort of explore new things that don't follow what we've been told as kids or as you grow up, right? I think what's interesting for me is what I call a paradigm assessment, right? So you think about the paradigms that you grew up with and what is no longer true, right? And that's an interesting way to start. Sort of like, what are the things that you've been told? Like, this is maybe a paradigm for careers. Like, this is what you should be doing as a career. But actually, if you look at it these days, I mean, Ben talked about this new generation entering the workforce.
Yeah.
Like jobs are experiments right now,
Yeah.
right? There's things that I want to learn. And actually, because there's no longer a linear path, it's actually interesting where people do different things because these different things amalgamate to new things, right? So like, if we think about the roles that are available right now, data scientists, like AI, prompt engineer, like none of these things existed 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yes.
But they're amalgamation of different things, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting perspective around that.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot about this subject as we all have been, I guess, right? And I have a 15-year-old son who in a few years will enter university. And obviously you continue to think about, okay, what should he study? What's going to help him succeed and all that? And the scary thing is at some point, and obviously we are still at the very, very beginning of AI maturity even, right? It's going to get better and smarter and all that. They say that anything that can go into a textbook, AI can replace.
Yep.
Anything that comes from a textbook, anything that has formulaic, for example, or are very objective in nature.
Yeah.
Almost all of that.
Retention of knowledge is
retention of knowledge
yes.
and output based on that as well, right? AI can replace. So to your point, as part of we think about reinvention, we also should consider what are the old rules that we continue to abide to, and what doesn't apply anymore, and what are new rules that we should think about.
Yeah.
I mean, I always quote you on this, probably the only quote I always quote you on, which is, what are you optimizing for?
Yeah.
And that's how I think about reinvention.
Yeah.
Right? As an individual, some people optimize for different things, right? I optimize for freedom.
Yeah.
Optimize for happiness. I optimize for growth. I optimize for money, for example.
Yeah.
And so as you think about reinvention of yourself, I guess that's important as well, right? What do I want of this? And what are the steps I need to do? What are the change I need to make? What are the new rules I need to follow in order to get to evolve me or whatever that the end result could be like.
So I love how you all are framing things up, right? You got this paradigm model. I can't remember what you said.
Paradigm assessment.
Paradigm assessment model.
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about how you approach like the way you think of things, So it's like, and for anyone out there, let's say you're in your 20s now, and then how should I approach reinvention? Because a 20-year-old versus a 30-year-old versus a 40-year-old, it's going to be vastly different. Let's talk about individual first. Maybe we can talk a little bit about organization, but that's a different space also, right? How do you think, what would be a model? Is that the model that you apply? Or what would be an approach of, hey, it's time to reinvent? Like, how would you know when, and what would be the thinking be? Just like thinking, the world is changing so quickly. I think there's always an inertia or a fear growing up. Like, what's it going to be? Am I ready? What happens if my job changes? I lose my job? Am I preparing myself for the future to really set myself up for success? These are things that goes through many people's minds, right? Across different decades, like 20, 30, 40, for example. So as a 20-year-old, how would you approach reinvention, right? It's probably very different from a 40, 50-year-old person. What are your thoughts there?
How do the artists think about it? Like, I'm a young artist, I'm coming out.
Yeah.
I know I have some level of talent.
Yeah.
The world is changing. Streaming is it now.
Yeah.
Breaking into mainstream is hard. How do artists think about
I think that's a great question, right? So I think the way you approach it is, if you look at a young artist, like 20-year-old, I think that's a lot of space for experimentation. And I kind of map it towards your life chapters also, right? As you go, again, everyone has their own journey. So as you get older, you will have different responsibilities.
Priorities will change.
Priorities will change. Values will always be there, but all these things will shift, right? So as a younger artist, I think your mindset would be like, it's very different also. I think, so my approach would be, if you are 20, I think you should experiment, try different things. But that should continue. So my baseline of reinvention is about curiosity. Curiosity and having a mind on what that really looks like. Because if you're remaining curious, I always say this, like if your curiosity, your mind's always open. The moment you're starting to judge, you're shutting doors. So curiosity opens doors, judgment closes doors. So curiosity is key. So if I were working with a young artist, for example, like I'll be asking many questions between both of us, like how would you foresee things happening? What are you really good at? What your strengths are? What are you known for? And how would you envision yourself to be? And then start working towards areas of competency or even skills that you need to develop, or if you think even further, what that might look like. So it's really an exploration, I feel. Like finding a career path, I'm quoting a friend also, he mentioned this, it's really like a scavenger hunt, right? You're trying to find things, right? But if you don't start searching and don't start getting data points or insights and experiences, it's harder for you to make better decisions also. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the way I approach it from a thinking perspective.
I don't think it's any different from how I would address it, right? I would say the same thing when you're young.
Yeah.
I would say those things. I would say get curious.
Yeah.
Try many things out. Work hard. Get to know people. I think it's all those things. I don't think would change in regardless of whether it's AI or non-AI, or whether you're in a corporate job or a creative job, right? I would say in your 20s, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Have as much output as possible, meet as many people as possible, do as many things as possible, right? And then obviously with the goal of at some point finding something you can do really, really well, or that you really, really love, or you find the space that you can excel in, for example, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's...
Is there an intersection of a Venn diagram?
I was going to draw this up. Maybe you should draw something.
It's one big circle.
Yeah.
Right? I wouldn't say it's any different. I mean, the funny thing is, I think in all that, what we are saying is that the emotional intelligence is equally as important as
Yes.
the IQ.
The soft
right?
skills are.
The soft skills, being able to navigate, being able to be self-aware of where you are and where you need to be. I think that part becomes probably even more important or even more necessary today than it was when jobs were very linear.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of really focusing on strengths, because obviously I'm a strengths coach also, but strengths is really key. Self-awareness, super important. I feel that, and it is a journey. Like, ask me 20 years ago, I had no clue what I wanted to do. Yeah. No clue. Many things I expect in my lives. But I think it's just learning and remaining open and exploring. Yeah. Having the courage to try new things and not being afraid to fail. I think that's also very important.
I agree on all these points. And I think, again, you talk to a 20-year-old, like in my 20s, I had no idea what I was doing, what I wanted. And actually, it's also what you want changes. Like when when you're a kid and you go like, when you're younger, you go like, this is what I want. And then when you get there, you're like, actually, this is not what I want. And it's not because what you want has changed, but because who you are have changed as a person, right? Your values have changed, your perspective have changed. I think that's kind of interesting. And also when you're in your 20s, obviously your focus is a little bit different. Like now we are more established. So certain things maybe we deprioritize. Freedom is more important. But for them, a lot of times it's also like making, a career, like making a name for themselves. Money becomes important. Time. You always think about like, there's health, time, and money as a spectrum of like three points, right? And then when you're younger, you have a lot more time, a lot more health, but you have no money, so you sacrifice for the other. But then as you get older, the whole pyramid flips.
Yeah.
And you try to, get more time, right? Yeah. Family, things that you want to do. And it's also a case where when you do all these experiments, it's not about finding out what you want, but more importantly, finding out what you don't want. Yeah. I think that's that's probably more important to me. Like you find out the things that are non-negotiable, things that you won't do, and then you focus on the things that you want to, right? Yeah. And curiosity is important. I also think what's interesting is there's a concept, and we've talked about this, right? Scott Adams, who wrote the Dilbert comics, talks about this thing called talent stack, right? Which is, to me, an interesting construct, which I wished I knew, like when I was younger, right? Which is the notion that, like, we talk about creativity, all ideas are combinational, right? Like, no idea is truly original. You always take, different things and possibly non-relevant, non-adjacent things and put them together, and they form new ideas. I think skills and experience are similar. Like you want to try to find what your talent stack are that makes you uniquely you. And typically what it is that there is a sort of foundation list of skills that everybody should have, like be able to speak well, write well, critical thinking. But then on top of that, you want to find like the most non-adjacent stuff as much as possible, right? So maybe you're good at data, but you also like ballet. I know, like stuff like that actually brings about something unique for yourself that becomes uniquely used. And you can see a lot of people out there where they have all these insights and ways of doing things that you don't typically think because they have all these non-adjacent interests. Yeah. I find that fascinating, and I find that's probably the way you should think about it. No longer about like just a linear career path.
So in like 20s, it sounds like keeping things really open. Like you're sharing, like just driving curiosity, just really experimenting, learning the skills, growing your self-awareness, the emotional awareness, all that is very key. I think that goes along, right? If you kind of build, I love what you said, like the stack. What is it called again?
Talent stack.
Talent stack. Wow, very power. Okay, talent stack. Okay, so if you're building a talent stack for the 20s, okay, that's we spoke a little bit about that. Yeah. That's like some key talent stack. Do you think that changes in your 30s and 40s, or are we just building on it? And what are we exploring if you're building on it? Let's talk a little bit about that, because 20s, okay, just go out and play, try new stuff. You're still young, a lot of energy. Wow, just go, and then maybe land in a place, for example. In your 30s is a different space, and everyone's different.
Yep.
What do you think would be the add-ons to the talent stack? I love that phrase, lah. It's quite interesting. To the 20s, or in addition in your 30s, what would that thing be?
Once you get to your 30s, there is some level of priorities in your life already. Like you need to focus on certain things. I mean, but at the same time, I think the mindset of, I know it's kind of overused, but part of the talent stack is the sort of intrinsic stuff that you develop, right? So we talked a little bit about curiosity, we talked a bit about hard work, like grit, resilience, like things like that is a byproduct of what you built. Yeah. Trying to keep being curious and gaining experiences and learning things, right? And experiencing, I guess, failures in some sense, right? Being able to deal with that and quickly move on. I mean, I always say this, like, everything's a hypothesis until you validate it. So you just see things as jobs and things that you do as experiments, little quick experiments to validate. And if it works, you double down on it. And then that's where you do in your 30s when you figure out like kind of what you don't want and what you want. And instead of breadth, you try to go depth. Yeah.
Without mentioning age, I think after exploration and,
I like that.
and curiosity, you're getting to the point where, okay, I know what I want to focus on. Right. And that's the period you go, okay, these are the areas where I want to invest more into, I want to focus on. And as you do that, I guess when you look at your talent stack, there are going to be some areas where you are doing better than others. And go, if I want to focus on that and do that, where are the gaps that I'm missing, right? And then start to fill those gaps in and go over-index on some things versus other, because I'm very clear. That's what I want to do. In part of finding your focus and knowing what you don't want to do is, as you get older and obviously more mature in your career, reinvention comes at a cost as well. And knowing what that cost is and what you want to pay and what you don't want to pay for becomes more apparent in your 30s. 20s, you go, just go out, right? The cost is low for me to continue changing, pivot from one thing to another. As you go up, as you focus and you go, okay, I know what I want now. Okay, thinking about those costs becomes more important. Growing, even in your current job, right? Going from one level to another, taking on a manager role, it comes at a cost. And is that a cost that I want to? And being very clear about that, I find important as well.
I love what you said about, let's not look at age, about phases. It's about, because everyone goes through a different phase or a journey. Seasons of life, so I think if you were to think about it, like, let's take away the notion, of, I need to hit a certain time by a certain age.
That's a paradigm too.
That's a paradigm. I almost feel that we should think about this conversation and maybe create, I don't know, I'm not committing to anything or anybody out there, but I mean, something to explore further. Maybe for our next session, how do we unpack some of these models? We can do that. Be more scientific, based on what we know, and let's explore, but
it's more actionable as well.
More actionable, and I think that's something we could highlight at the end of the session. We explore, but just that thinking on different chapters, no timelines. How do we achieve some of these goals, right? So I also want to talk a little bit about like the definition of what success means as you kind of grow in your life, right?
Yes,
we're exploring, we're doing different things. What does the definition of success mean, and is it even important, honestly speaking? What's your take on that?
What does success mean to you, Ben?
I'll give you the consultant answer.
Okay, what's the consultant answer? I don't know. Whatever.
It depends.
I love it. Yeah, it depends.
I mean, look, we all know the answer to that. It really, going back to the point of what are you optimizing for, right? I think most people are there. I mean, not everybody wants to hit the pinnacle every career or every company, for example. People are going, success to me means I am retired by 40. Right? Or I can move to another country, for example. I have 3 kids and they're happy. That's success to me, right? So I think it's all very, very individual.
Yeah, it is. It is. My definition of success, I don't know, I shared this with you, was very basic when I was young, in school and all that. My definition of success was, the key value was freedom. Freedom to do whatever I want as much as I can, but not freedom for a selfish reason. Right? My definition of success is going to work in my jeans, t-shirt, sneakers, on my bicycle or a motorbike, whatever, and doing creative work that impacts lives and people's thinking. And to be able to make some money out of it, money wasn't my key success metric. It was like impact to people's thinking, people's lives, and the ability for them to grow and do better. And that to me was success. And also to be able to support my family and to buy my friend beers. Like, that was like, if I couldn't afford to buy my friends beers, that was like, nah, I'm not there yet. I want to buy all my buddies beers, the kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like stripped down. That was like a very simple.
We're going to hold you to that.
Yeah.
Anytime. Anytime for that. Yeah.
Do you guys know the show The Bear? Have you watched the show The Bear?
I can't remember.
So the Bear is about a show about a chef who left home very early, didn't come from a well-to-do family, went to the city, became a fine dining chef and got success.
Yeah.
Had to go home because he had to take over the family sandwich shop.
Okay.
Right? And that part was a whole invention by itself. I don't know why when we were talking about it, it reminded me of it. but when he went home, obviously he had to take over the shop and he reinvented that shop into a fine dining restaurant.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a burger joint or something.
It was a burger joint. Yeah. It was a sandwich place, right?
Yeah.
But and obviously there were people working there, his cousins and working on that.
Yeah.
His definition of success was obviously turning that into a fine dining restaurant.
Okay.
Right, and go, make it successful. It's small, it's shop. I can turn it around, make it successful and all that. Yeah. Obviously his family who was working there goes, why do we need to do this? We were happy, we were making some money, people were coming in, we had regulars in there. So even that, in that sense, you could see the definition of success being very different to very different people. I don't know why that reminded me of it.
Yeah.
And I guess just staying on that point, the interesting thing about that was that going back to the point around emotional intelligence, you need to cut this out and splice this in different parts, was that he had to make sure that in his reinvention plan, he was able to bring everyone along the way. So as we talk about what's necessary for reinvention, I think there's that EQ as well in terms of how do we communicate, bring people along the way, lead the team in terms of that change, help them adapt to the change. I guess that's important. But I mean, even in that example, for example, you could bring out few things around reinvention.
Yeah. So that's so cool. I love how you kind of join the reinvention also with what the definition of success really means. Different values, different chapters. How what drives you?
Yeah.
What energizes you? What drives you?
Yeah.
What you're leaning on that you're naturally talented at.
Yeah.
And like double down on that and grow that. For example. Yeah.
Because I have people in my teams who, like what we're talking about, have different definitions of success, right?
Yes.
They come to work for different reasons.
Yes.
Some are
They have cats to feed.
They've got cats to feed.
Goldfish.
Right? Some are more aggressive in terms of ambition or rather corporate ambition. Some are there just to go, hey, I want a career. I like where I am. I don't want to be too aggressive.
Yeah.
Right? And so part of reinvention of organizations, right, is or even yourself and where you want to go is how do you get people along the same path and going towards the same direction and towards the same vision as well. That's really, really important.
Yes.
In terms of making sure that reinvention succeeds.
Yeah.
I think most organizations have the same thinking, which may be a bit outdated now, that everybody just wants to move upwards.
Yeah.
But that's not really sometimes the case. Sometimes it's a horizontal move out, right? Yeah. But I think to your point, I think the different seasons of life, you have different definitions of success. When I was younger, obviously, when you have no money, then some level of like external wealth, it's what success looks like. And I think a lot of it's also based on social programming, like what you see culturally on TV, other people, your friends, and all that. But that changes over time, right?
Yeah.
As you go older, as you realize what is it that you want, or more importantly, what is it that you don't want, right? So for me, like the definition of success now is like get a good night's sleep, peace of mind, good night's sleep. Freedom is in there, but I think like more definitive for me would be, waking up, not being rushed, and being intentional in how I live my days. Some sense of like being happy. And I know happy has a bit of like a loose definition, but for me, it's happiness at the moment. For me, the definition is just being excited to wake up.
Yeah.
Something, looking forward to something. But what I think is also interesting is as you grow older, you see like different definitions of success. I think what's interesting is that a lot of people trade what is important for what is measurable. Peace of mind is not measurable.
Yeah.
Wealth is measurable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, like owning something, having something, having a certain title, that's measurable. But like the important things aren't measurable. You can't really quantify the levels of fulfillment, peace of mind that you have. Yeah. But as you get older, I think maybe some parts of that you start to be able to dimensionalize and like bring to life, and that becomes more important.
Yeah.
But maybe it also requires a certain sense of experience, maybe maturity.
Yeah. So how do we, I mean, this I love all the nuggets, man. It's like so powerful. We should figure out how to compile some of these thoughts, right? But I think if how do we synthesize this on two themes, right? The theme of reinvention and definition of success, right? If someone to ask you today, could be your kid or could be a colleague or someone younger or someone senior even, hey, guys, like, how do I make sense of reinvention, where I am in my life now? What should I be doing? What should I be thinking about? And how should I maybe recalibrate what success means? A big question, I think. It's hard to answer, but from a personal perspective, take away consultant hat, what would you just naturally say to somebody who asked you, like, hey, any one of us maybe, or someone listening to us on whatever channels, like, hey, how do I figure this out? How do I figure out what success looks like? Or how do I figure out what does reinvention look like? Think about it. Like, it's a big question.
It is.
Yeah. But what comes off top of mind, like, okay, here are two things you might want to think about. How would you answer that question?
I'm looking at you, Ben.
I don't.
It's okay. We're okay with silence. We hold the space. We're okay with silence. I think I was about to respond also. So I think the way I would approach it is, number one, I think a lot of it starts with clarity. And clarity is different across your life, right? You think you found clarity, but maybe and it evolves also. So I almost feel that certain things in life you always require clarity, but what anchors you are your values, what your beliefs are, what is truly intrinsic within you as a human being, right? All that.
Yep.
I think getting clarity on what are your baselines, things that really resonates with you, really that you value, and what success means to you from that perspective, and then finding ways on cutting that up towards, okay, I need to think of one or two things I need to change or reinvent. And move in that direction. So starting from a base of clarity, a base of strengths and self-awareness and what's it called, emotional intelligence lah. I think that's like the fundamentals. I mean, if I were to talk to a psychologist or someone who's on that, it might be a very different answer. But just a layman perspective from my view is thinking about what is your baseline, which is your anchor points on your values, your what drives you, your strengths, what comes naturally for you, and then kind of figure out from there.
I think it's similar for me. I think ultimately a lot of it's down to values, more important principles in life, right? Things that are important to you that you talk about, like your reputation is basically how you see yourself, right? And I think a lot of it's like the stuff that you do and nobody's watching, like things that you feel are important to you, and there are certain principles in life you focus on. But more importantly, I think it's also finding out, I know this is a consulting word, but like what your North Star is, right? Like what is really truly important to you, and then that will sort of cascade down to success, and like the reinvention is really what you need to do to get there.
Yeah,
right? There are some, I guess, models, if I may, that you could probably use to kind of try to get there. One of it is sort of like time traveling, right? So just imagine yourself when you are like 80. What are the stories you want to be telling your grandkids, right? Like a lot of times I say, like, do the thing that, like, if you are unclear what to do, just take the decision that makes for a better story. Even if everything fails, there's a story to tell. There's an interesting story to tell. It's morbid as well because we're not here forever. Like a lot of times you think about, like, at your funeral, what do you want people to say about you? That's an interesting exercise to kind of make this concrete, right? What do you want people to remember you by? What do you want people to say about you? And those are the things that then are important to you. Yeah. And then that's how you define what success is. And some of it could be tangible. Some of it, like, I've taken care of my family and all that. Some of it could be intangible, like principles and values and things that are important. And then the reinvention part is simply just understanding that equilibrium doesn't exist. Like you get to a point where you feel like you're equilibrium, but then it tips, and then you have to just constantly reinvent to try to get there again. Yeah.
Interesting, right? I think, we're built on this, and maybe you can all have a couple of takes on this answer also, because it's quite a deep, quite a broad question, right? Is your definition of success also changes across time, because it could be very, very long term, like to a point of death, like what would people say about me?
Yeah.
And as you get older, you might think of that more versus when I'm young. But some people actually like, at the start, I want to leave a legacy already, right? So I think a lot of work on self-awareness, digging in deep, and how do we model this? Wow, this is like $1 million question, right? Like, how do we even structure this? If you ask a scientist or someone in this field of psychology or very deep kind of work, that would probably give you a couple of thoughts there also. But, how do we structure the thinking for a person asking this question? Like, for me, I think it does shift. I think that's a personal story. Like it does shift. As a young kid, I wanted to prove myself, and where did the behavior of trying to prove myself come from? all that things. It's a different perspective also, right? I'm just sharing it very transparently. You know, like prove myself meaning what's my self-worth? Where do I really make a mark in my career so that people like, hey, Gerald, well done, you achieved this role or this title and all that. In my 20s, I was very focused on that. Truthfully, I was trying, where was I going to? But in my deep down in my heart, I love music, I love creative, I love the creative space, but I was torn, like, okay, how can I make this work? And I chose a path. Eventually, like, okay, the couple things to be paying well, I'll do that, right? So it's also a journey lah. So I mean, in my 30s, it was a very different space. I was getting somewhere in my work. And there's how far do I want to push it? And what's my real meaning? I didn't ask about my purpose at the start. It was then I was getting the purpose answer, or the purpose came about much later. Like, okay, now what's my real purpose? Like, what do I really want to achieve? What's my impact to the world? Or what's my purpose? Like, what am I here for?
Yeah.
You know, all these things, you know, as a husband, as a son, whatever, you know, all the different roles you play.
You can only get there though where the bottom pyramid is fulfilled.
So what do you mean by the bottom pyramid?
Like if you think of, obviously Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like you can only think of the top stuff once the bottom stuff, security, like stuff like that.
Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Wi-Fi.
Yes,
yeah,
Wi-Fi.
we need Wi-Fi. Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you can only think about that, which is I think also why different people have different starting points, right? And I think where you see a lot of what's happening right around the world, where certain people make certain choices, and you go like, why would you do things this way? And actually, your starting point is different, and where you are is very different. Yeah, correct. Yeah. There are a couple of things. Obviously, the starting point is different, and it's hard for us also to understand where you are because your obviously circumstances make you do certain things, right? Strange things. But I think there's also a case where, like, we talk a lot about paradigms that were created. A lot of it's like, childhood, social programming and things like that. But some of it is physiological, like built into us, right? You talked a little bit about status. And people play the status game most of the time, but it's actually built into us because if you think about like store value is relatively new in terms of the history of mankind, right? Like it's only when you could store like grains and food when that started to accumulate wealth, the industrial age and all that other stuff. But before that, like we were socially programmed to one status because status then allows you first dibs to whatever minimal number of resources that you have in the tribe, like first dibs to mate and all the other stuff. So I think we are physiologically programmed to want some of these things. And part of this whole going towards reinvention is to realize what you need to sort of deprogram yourself around.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Deprogram to reprogram and to reinvent,
correct.
Right? So that kind of cycle.
Yeah, so like how you were raised, what things that you've been exposed to, but also like some stuff, some of these foundational things that you just need to deprogram yourself.
Yeah, and because everyone goes through life, good times and bad times. Yep. And if you're fortunate, wow, everything is easy. You have the space to find clarity, you have the space to explore without some stuff. Like if you have a sick family member, life throws stuff at you, right?
Yep.
And then it's about recalibration. Then I use this word quite a lot, like for now, I need to do this. Yep. Then it's a window I need to punch through for now.
Yep.
And then we'll pick it up again later.
That's a good frame.
So I did a video recently on like, sometimes you need to do things just for now. Yep. And that's a reality. Like life is never a linear path. Yep. Like life throws spanners on us, a death, a success, whatever. And sometimes you need to recalibrate. So I think I'd love to hear that perspective also. This is really interesting. It's like, how do you find clarity on what your true self is, what drives you, what your values are, and it takes time to kind of build that. Some people have it faster, some people lesser.
Yep.
And then eventually knowing what your purpose is, and that is going to take a lot of work also. And then as life happens, you just need to recalibrate, right?
Yep.
And focus. So I can't draw a model right now, but I think it's something that I feel that we could figure out.
Yeah. But that's why I don't like that question. I don't like the question of what does success look like?
Yeah, maybe
because I find it to be a limiter for what could be based on what comes along the way.
Yeah.
My first job, and I told you guys this before. Yes. I had a salary of 1,008 ringgit.
Yeah.
That was my first salary. Yeah. And I remember saying to myself at that point, the moment I hit 3,005 ringgit a month,
I think I so weird this. Yeah.
I would be so happy.
Yeah, me too.
At that point, that was my definite success. And I went along, obviously, that went up and up and up and up. All that kind of stuff. And to me, I find like life is so unpredictable.
Yes.
Why should I limit myself in terms of what is coming along the way, the opportunities along the way. The way I rather would think about it is, and the other reason why is also, I don't want my son or the kids or anybody that works with me to limit their opportunities or what they could do or their ambitions, right?
Yes.
I mean, these guys could be the next Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever not. So why limit yourself to a definition of today based on today's environment? Yes. The way I'd rather think about it is look at two things. One, the markers around me in terms of whether I'm okay. Am I happy? Am I healthy? Have I got friends around me? Is my family okay? Those are the markers around me, right? I'm like, okay, I'm okay. Yeah. And then secondly is what are my checkpoints along the way, and go, okay, past this checkpoint, what's the next checkpoint? I mean, very similar to running, right? Yeah. I mean, going around, okay, looking at my metrics and say, am I okay? Is my heart rate okay? Can I go run past the next checkpoint? I'd rather do that than go, let me define what success looks like in 20 years' time that limits me, and go, okay, that's my level of contentment. I'm not going to move anywhere from.
Where do you keep this dashboard?
You'd like to watch.
yeah. You know, I mean, that's
I love that. I love that, Ben. I think let's switch it up, and then that's what this is all about, right? We want to challenge the question, and I love it. That's why Ben always challenges the question. Because I freaking love this guy. Like, he always challenges it, and I think that's a really good perspective on like, okay, why even bother asking this question?
Yep.
You know, the question could be like, actually, what's your purpose? Like, why are you doing this in the very first place, and what do you want to give back to people, for example? I don't know. All these kind of thoughts come through, but maybe let's stop asking what's the definition of success. Like, what's your purpose?
Sure, when you're talking about that, I feel like part of what you're referring to is also this idea of happiness, because happiness is fleeting. Like, once you get it, then you want more.
Yeah.
Right? Like, life is not always as good as it seems or as bad as it seems, right? So there's always like a delta between that, and that's the same thing with success and happiness. When you chase some of these things, like, they are not constant. They are once you get there, you get the dopamine fix.
Correct.
You're chasing for the next thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I can't remember what the quote was, but I'll paraphrase. Is that the challenge of success is once you get there, what you wanted wasn't what it is anymore, right?
Yeah.
And we always want the next thing, right? So I think that's the problem. Like, I know this quote, it's kind of a silly quote, but I feel like it's important. It's actually very easy to be happy. The problem is if you want to be happier than someone else, the other people.
That's cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
This is a very tough question. I think it's not easy. Like, if you were to say, okay, let's go back to if someone to ask you this question again, like, what would you say actually? Like, we spoke about a lot of things, right? And it's trying to explain it. How would you answer the question of, for example, like, we spoke about reinvention and definition of success.
Yeah.
Okay, so reinvention is like across many different platforms, very different traditions of life, blah, blah, blah. Then you challenge the question, like, do we even need the question of what's this definition of success question for in the very, very first place? Right. So if someone would ask you these two questions, what would you reply back to them? Like, someone, watching or listening to us, what would you say to them? What would your one piece of personal advice or thoughts be to someone, hey, I'm trying to figure my life out. I'm trying to figure out what I need to reinvent and I'm trying to find that definition of success for myself.
Maybe if we amalgamate both together, it's actually the definition of success needs to be constantly reinvented, because it's not fixed, right? So, like, to your point, there's no top of the mountain to get to, because that changes circumstances, and it also limits you to what that could be. I mean, to your point, as your kid's success is buying beers for your friend. So, but that's obviously now within reach. So what's the next step beyond that, right? So I think there's a sense that, number one, everything's in flux, right? So nothing is fixed. And that's part of sort of the growth mindset. And the second thing is, obviously, when you think about reinvention, is really like the fact that anything is possible. I think that's also something I found recently very interesting. This notion of being a high agency person, right? Which is, you can do anything in life as long as it doesn't defy the laws of physics. So then that just kind of challenges you all the time and gives you, and then the reinvention is really just finding the tools, the processes, the things you need to do to get to that. Yeah.
I think about two things. I think about muscles and I think about tools.
Yeah.
I think about tools that you can acquire, and sometimes it needs changing, and you can go and update and get new tools and all that. So what are the tools that you require to succeed? And then you go, what are the muscles I need to build, because those are going to help me use those tools, but also going to help me succeed, right? And I think things like working hard is a muscle. Being able to have critical thinking is a muscle. I think reinvention and constantly adapting yourself and being able to change on the fly and be adaptable, I think is a muscle. Yeah. And it's not necessarily just a tool. Yeah. And so to me, it's as you think about, regardless of whether you're a student or your 20s or your 30s or whatever not, just thinking about those two things, right? How do I build those
Tools
muscles?
and muscles.
And what tools are going to help me succeed?
I think about it very similarly, but my muscles are called operating system. So like, I just need to constantly update your OS in a very like tech way.
Yeah. I think for me, my tools are the skills I learned, the models that I use. Those are tools. Like, but you need to practice. It's like sports. I think sports is a really good analogy. You know, if you want to be a great tennis player or a great runner,
absolutely,
you got the right technique. You have the right people, resources around you to succeed. The right mindset. Right skill sets, and then you got to put in the work, man. Like there's no shortcut lah.
And I love that, right? If you think about tennis, for example, some people don't look at some of the muscles that have been built along the 10, 20 years away. Even basic things like your strokes, your footwork, for example, preparation for each return. All those things are muscles built that allows you to use your tools appropriately.
Muscle memory.
So what are the muscles that you require, right, in order to help you succeed along the way? I think those things I would think about.
Feels like a capability assessment, Ben.
Wow. So I mean, that's a great way to kind of frame it up. In the end of the day, you need to find what motivates you, what your purpose is, your North Star or your purpose is, you know, and then and that shifts and that grows along the way. Don't be in a rush. I think we all grow in our journeys. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. You are who you are, and then what's your journey towards your purpose? And then what are the tools and muscles you need to build in each phase of your life to get there? Right. How do we find clarity? I think that's a lot of questioning, a lot of discovery to kind of find out and navigate or kind of triangulate, you know, what that looks like.
Outside of the question of why, should be the question of why not. As well, right? Like why and to me that's how I think. Like Beyonce, why not do country
music?
For example, right? I mean, you think about Taylor Swift and her reinvention from country to indie to pop. I think the question should be, why not? Why can't I do more? Why can't I do this, for example? And I think that becomes really important.
So asking yourself, okay, you know, why not? And then answering those questions also. Right. So kind of many layers kind of peel that. Cool. I think we are at 1 hour, 13 minutes, or I don't know, whatever minute time now it is.
Cut it down to 20 seconds.
And if we were kind of frame it up, you know, if we were to ask each of us, I'll answer this question also. What's one piece of wisdom you would tell your younger self, right? I mean, it's a very good old question, but I think, you know, I'll ask everybody this anyway. What's one good old piece of wisdom that you wish to tell your younger self?
Wow.
Deep,
for sure.
Okay, maybe towards the line of like reinvention or what we've been talking about, right? What would you give that one piece of wisdom?
My whole career has been reinvention. I mean, I went from banking to marketing to tech, now into consulting. And a piece of advice that I got very early on is that if you want exponential growth, go after exponential steps. Go after those big changes, right? And I think if I were to look back, I think a lot of times I've done that. I think along the way, there's probably a couple of things I would have advised myself. One is be focused. Right? And learn how to focus, learn what to say no to. Becomes really, really important. Be patient with learning the hard things.
Love it.
With building the muscles. I think sometimes we get impatient. We focus on the tools, right? Because those things are sexy, they're there, they're available, they're made for already, they're ready to be used. Muscles takes time. So be patient with building some of those fundamentals and those muscles. Those will be
love it. What will be yours, man, Vincent?
Don't try to avoid the pain. Life is going to be generally, like in work, in personal life, there's going to be stuff that you want to avoid, and it's actually doing the hard things that actually make life so much more interesting, gives it a lot more texture, right? So I think as growing up, I was trying to avoid a lot of the like unpleasant things. It's actually the avoidance that gives you so much pain. And more importantly, it's just how to deal with it. I've got 2 kids, and a lot of what I've been trying to sort of cultivate in them is like the most important skill in life is that you will figure it out as you go along.
Very nice, very powerful, man. For me personally, would be not giving a damn what people thought about me. And that's a bit deeper for me just because I grew up in like always thinking what people would someone be thinking about me, and just being very transparent. That was me feeling like insecure, like, wow, shit, I don't know, like, what would people really think about me? And if the moment you took that away, you feel super liberated. And that was what I learned along the way. So if I were going to go back and say, hey, you know what? Just don't give a shit about what people think about you. Your best buddies and your best friends will be with you regardless of who you are. And these are people to keep. People who just be with you because of what you have. You can do without these people, right? So just being confident about not giving a damn about what people thought about me. That was one piece of thing I would say to myself back then. And the other thing was another quote one of my ex-bosses used to tell me is like, do the most difficult job. Don't be afraid to do the most difficult job. And especially when you're younger, you got very little to lose. You got everything to gain. Most painful jobs will give you a systems thinking because you think beyond just one task. You're trying to solve a very systems thinking problem. And that to me was one of the biggest lessons or wisdom that my ex-boss used to tell me very early in my career. And everything that you do will be an upside.
It's asymmetrical as well.
Exactly.
The downside is capped. The upside is
there. You are take the difficult job and everything you do, you grow, but you are going to be in an exponentially kind of growth path. I mean, those are the two things. I know I asked for one, but those are the two things that kind of resonate. But feel free to jump in, man. If you've got any other thoughts that you guys had.
I mean, just on that, there was a quote I really like, which is about doing self-elective hard things, because then you know when those things come in your life that you can do it. That is the benefit of doing it. Like, and a lot of times we try to avoid those things because it's like difficult and challenging. But it's again mental time travel. You just look back and all the best memories are all just powering through all these hard things in life.
But also within that, find the learning in what you do. Right? There's always something you can learn and grow. That everybody else is missing out from that hard thing you do. And I was listening to podcasts yesterday, and it was so important. Like, one of the roles we have in our job is this thing called a QA tester. Right? The QA tester is after all the developers do their sexy thing developing, this guy tests what everybody does and say, it's good, it works. Yep, you pass all the tests and all that kind of stuff, right? It's the thing where people think it's the lowest grade job and it's the most junior guy does the jing and all that kind of stuff. But I was listening to something yesterday whereby it says that in the world of AI, when AI starts to take over the development cycle, right, and coding becomes automated and all that, what happens is, how do I know that AI is not hallucinating? How do I know that it's following the right job? This role becomes so important in the end because it's almost like the last check before it goes out to the world.
It's funny, but that's the first role that AI will take over.
Right? Now. Yeah, exactly. And so it goes, find the learning in everything you do, because if you do it better than anybody else, you're going to learn those fundamental skills, build those muscles that everybody else is missing. Prepare you for the next.
The AI piece is another big area. I think we'll definitely get into in-depth conversations about AI. I think there's so much value and experiences that both of you also have in this space, with working with different clients and organizations and the way this is all moving forward. So I think that's pretty much. Any final words before we kind of wrap up today's conversation?
I think reinvention is such a big theme today. I think it would be interesting to find other people and
so much to unpack.
Get those different perspectives, different roles and different jobs and how people are thinking about it, whether it's music or in the corporate role and banking and finance. And I think that's where I'm excited to go.
There's a lot of stuff. How about yourself?
One of the things in my mind was, how do we keep this flexible but yet useful? And I think, again, the reinvention team, and also something that is really a pressing moment for everybody, because you see what's happening right now and sometimes you feel helpless. But if you can provide some level of how to think about it, how to frame this, what are the ways that you can action on this, it would truly, I think, be useful. I think that's the first thing. And secondly, the thinking of like, okay, if somebody else can do this, more people sort of will take the notion and say, okay, I can be in control. I can actually affect the change that I want to happen, right? So I think that's probably, to me, the most interesting part.
Well, I mean, there's so much that we covered today. I almost feel that if we were to go back and synthesize this, we could come up with one or two like models or ideas that we can actually put up somewhere and for people to kind of get more information on and all that. So thank you all for sticking around. I hope whatever we shared resonates with you. There'll be more amazing episodes coming along with amazing guests from the business and creative and entrepreneurial world. You can find out more about the Wild and Wise podcast on wildandwise.co, which is WILDNWISE.co. More to follow, and I'll see you guys all real soon.